There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi everyone, Recruiting Future is currently on its summer break, and the regular show is going to resume next week. I didn't want to leave you with nothing to listen to over the Labour Day weekend though. The Alder Hour is my show with Purple Acorn, which live streams every Monday on LinkedIn. Every show features an interview segment, and I wanted to share 3 of the best interviews that we've had so far, showcasing 3 of the smartest people in the industry. Keep listening to hear Master Burnett from HireBrain discussing the ways that AI is going to augment hiring, Madeline Laurano, the founder of Aptitude Research, talking about the impact of AI on the vendor landscape, and Laurie Ruettimann, the punk rock HR legend, warning us about the end of work as we know it. Hi Master, how are you doing? And welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. So for people who might not know you, can you just introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure. My name is Master Burnett. I am currently leading growth for a company called HireBrain, based here in the U.S. I have been in the recruiting and talent advisory space for probably the last, it's embarrassing to say now, 25 years. I'm not sure where the first 20 went. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has been that long. I've had a distinct opportunity to work with a wide variety of organizations around the world in a number of countries. And I'm just really passionate about how organizations put people together to make things happen.
Yeah, fantastic. It's I know what you mean. I don't know quite where the last 20 years have gone. And I certainly don't know where the last 5 years have gone. It appears to be just some kind of massive blur of disruption. And I suppose on that point, I mean, this is such a fascinating time in TA, in work, in talent at the moment. What are you seeing? What's most surprising you? What are the sort of the biggest changes that you're sort of observing in the market at the moment?
This is just a really chaotic time in the market. I don't think we've ever had this much external force applied to the talent acquisition function within an organization in quite some time. At least in the last 25 years, it streaks out. Not only do we have just the massive evolution of artificial intelligence within the workforce, we've also just got tremendously chaotic macroeconomic climate. And those two things are coming together at a time that are just driving tremendous change, not only in how organizations put their workforce together, but how they look at workforce flexibility, how they look at evolving strategy on a much faster time frame. So chaos. It's chaos.
It certainly is chaos. And tell us a little bit more about how you're seeing organizations responding, because I know that you're a keen observer of sort of large progressive employers. What are some of the things that are happening, that they're doing to try and deal with this fast change and this kind of real uncertainty that's out there?
We see it going 2 directions. Manager self-service was, I remember it early in my career, popped up and very quickly faded away with regards to recruitment, because it typically meant just large-scale, uncoordinated use of external agencies and ballooning cost. But you fast forward to today, and we are seeing organizations, particular organizations with a higher volume workforce, looking at manager self-service and replacing talent acquisition functions with tooling to support that effort. That's one direction we see going. And I wouldn't say that that's the majority of what we see happening. I think the other direction we see happening is the evolution from talent acquisition to talent advisor. And there's a lot of things that fall under that talent advisor title. We're seeing talent acquisition absorb more responsibility for talent planning, helping managers think through what is the right labor type, what is the right structure for this role, what skills are being replaced by AI or could be replaced by AI, or how do we use alternative labor types in this particular area. We're seeing internal mobility. We're seeing talent acquisition take on responsibility for early career development inside organizations. So that transition from talent acquisition to talent advisor is probably the one that is most exciting to me.
Yeah.
And it's the one we see happening in the greatest number of professional hiring environments.
No, absolutely. And you've got really interesting, your company's got such an interesting product in that kind of area in terms of sort of hiring manager enablement and intelligence and all that kind of stuff. Just give us a quick overview of what it does so we can kind of contextualize that a little bit.
When I first encountered HireBrain, I'll be honest, when I looked at the website, I had no idea what HireBrain was doing. I was introduced to our founder, David Nason, by another colleague. And when he said that if we just had a conversation, the two of us would get along quite well. And so we set up a conversation, and I learned a little bit about what HireBrain was doing, and I was enamored from that start. Hiring has a strategy problem. Always has a strategy problem. Even in the most progressive organizations, we set hiring strategy when we hire a TA leader. We build all the technology function around it. We build our approaches and our methodologies. And the business could change its business strategy 15 times in the course of that tenure. The hiring function is not going to change. We've always relied upon, the talent acquisition function has always relied upon the hiring manager to translate business strategy into hiring need. But if you look back and you think about it, how often do the structure of job descriptions change over the course of a TA leader's time? They don't. There's very little translation of business strategy into talent strategy in even the most progressive organizations. And so when we look at how we're bringing people into the organization, it's not aligned with corporate strategy. In many cases, we are not starting with the role or what needs to be accomplished in an organization. We're starting with a generic set of responsibilities, aspirational responsibilities at that. And we're putting people characteristics around what we want to see in a role, not what we need accomplished. Yeah. And so I think it's no surprise that the vast majority of new hires in an organization will tell you 6 months post-hire that the work they're actually doing bears little resemblance to the role that was advertised to them or that they were even assessed for during the interview process.
Yeah. That I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that from that kind of job description onwards, there is that massive disconnect. It's like, use the job description we used last time, or whatever it is. It's just that it's almost kind of like we'll get the right person in, and then we'll think about the strategy sort of approach, isn't it? And I think the most exciting thing is that AI technology can change this. And I think that you're using an interesting kind of combination of AI, but also other things like, neuroscience and, behavioral stuff, aren't you?
Great. I never actually answered your last question as to what HireBrain is. I got off onto the problem that HireBrain was addressing. HireBrain is using a combination of tools and approaches to help hiring managers and recruiters solve that strategy problem, to better align hiring to business strategy and to drive impact in the business in a way that is easily recognizable to all of the stakeholders involved. And we do it using AI. Plays a big role in what HireBrain does, not AI the singular. I think any organization that tells you their solution is an AI really doesn't have an idea as to what they're actually enabling or transacting. HireBrain uses a combination of small language models that are designed for specific actions throughout the hiring process. We do use large language models largely for their generative language capabilities or for language refinement. And then we use AI also to drive automation and coordination throughout the process. So at its core, HireBrain is about helping hiring managers better articulate what needs to be accomplished in a role over the course of the next 12 to 18 months and aligning the rest of not only the hiring cycle. When I started with HireBrain, we were largely focused just on the hiring cycle. But today, HireBrain is being deployed pre-hiring cycle. We're helping hiring managers craft justifications for hire.
Yeah.
We're helping workforce planning functions better articulate talent shifts within the organization. We are helping post-hire. We're driving onboarding plans based on what needs to be accomplished and how the organization needed to down-level hiring. So today, HireBrain is playing a role outside of the hiring cycle, but our core technology is really focused on better articulating what needs to be accomplished and aligning the rest of the talent function to that objective.
And I think that's fascinating because we often talk about the role that AI plays and the role that humans play in the hiring process. And there's always this, there's always kind of debate about, well, actually, what is it that humans are better than machines at and all this sort of thing. And I think a lot of recruiters would say that actually, hiring manager intake meetings, teasing the right information out of the hiring manager is, a skill that they have and something that technology could never do better. But you come at it from a very different angle where actually technology is doing things that humans can't do in that context, isn't it?
It is true. So HireBrain has a very clear philosophy on the application of AI within the organization. We are not about displacing the talent acquisition function at all. HireBrain is laser focused on augmenting the talent acquisition function. And we're doing it in such a way that we want to up-level, augment, and automate the things that drive the most value or that matter most to producing a business impact. And so when we talk about the role of the human, even in the best context, the large language models, which the vast majority of talent solutions are based on, their training data wasn't fit for purpose to begin with.
Yeah.
And so if you take a large set of mediocre, slightly related data, you train the large language model on it, at best, you're going to get the mean of mediocrity coming out of it.
Yeah.
And so, you're going to get average. And so when we talk about the role of the human in the talent acquisition process, the human discernment, all of the unsaid information, the uncaptured information, all of that organizational knowledge that doesn't exist in the models, that's really what we rely upon the recruiter and the hiring manager to leverage in driving this process and making it more than the average of average or mean. It's really about making the best possible outcome specific to an organization. And that's one area where HireBrain is truly unique. We are what we call context aware. So I mentioned we use a lot of small language models. We use large language models, but we also have a filter and wrap strategy that sit between all of them, where we take organizational strategy information, we take organizational branding information, we take information about the personas of the players in the organization, and HireBrain has access to all of that context. So even if we have two customers that are looking at using HireBrain for the same core challenge, what HireBrain will produce for organization A will be different than what we produce for organization B because our models are all context aware.
I think that's just fascinating. And I think also that the kind of like, automation and augmentation, I just think is really interesting because it's almost like the augmentation of today is the automation of tomorrow as the technology moves. And I think that's going to be, I think that could be like a problem for our industry to get its head around because this is a shifting thing and the barriers are moving continually.
It is continuing to shift. If I told you our product lifecycle was 6 months, I would be lying. It's probably even shorter than that now.
Wow.
It just continues to evolve at a pace that it literally does keep you awake at night. But what you highlighted there is augmentation. The augmentation of today is the automation of tomorrow. And I look back at what we are doing today, how we are augmenting people today, and it's not rocket science. What we're doing today in terms of augmentation is all the labor that a talent acquisition function would have been doing 35, 40 years ago that due to capacity challenges, we've just cut out.
Yeah.
It would have been, before we created a job description, there would have been a role design effort conducted in an organization. There would have been job analysis conducted. And that job analysis would have been repeated every time we wanted to execute that role. We don't do that anymore. Organizations don't have the capability or capacity to do that anymore. We would have created a hiring plan and a hiring strategy. And part of that hiring plan would have been to create a very specific screening assessment for the role that was role specific, to build out an interview guide. How are we going to conduct this interview? What are the questions we're going to ask? That doesn't happen anymore. Instead, we improvise our way through the process in most cases. If we do have an interview guide, it's a peanut butter interview guide. We've got this bank of 120 questions that we pull from, and hiring managers ask the same things over and over, or they just completely deviate from the guide and go from their gut with whatever managed to piss them off the day before that's still top of mind. That's how it's actually being done. The vast majority of the process is being improvised in terms of its human execution.
Yeah.
Yes, talent acquisition technology has made all of the mundane data movement from application to application. That we've done that to death. What we haven't done is solve for the human execution problem, and that's really where HireBrain is focused.
And I just think it's fascinating in terms of like bringing back what used to be there before technology kind of made everything quicker. And I suppose then as a final question, and it's impossible to predict. So it's more of a, what would you like to see, or what do you think? I mean, where would you like to see the future? Where do you think we might be going with all of this? Because HireBrain is not focused on replacement, we're not actively building fully automated bots today to take the activity away from a recruiter. But there are places where we see automation playing a very key role, and so we look to our partners to augment what we do and tie into what we do and leverage what we do. And one of the areas that I think is blowing my mind right now are some of the fully automated AI interview solutions that are coming to market. Not only do they have the ability to take information from, say, a HireBrain intake agenda and from a HireBrain role design and take our interview guide and execute that interview guide, the AI has the ability to determine on the fly whether or not the respondent has fully answered the question. And if not, continue to ask follow-up questions to tease out that level of detail, and then to summarize that level of detail, not augment, not recreate, not put words in the candidate's mouth, but to summarize what was actually said in that process. And to be able to execute those interviews in 165 languages instantaneously with culturally sensitive translation is mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing, especially given that one of the biggest problems organizations say they have today is the overabundance of applicants they have per role. To put a high-quality screening assessment that is role-specific up front of that process, and to have that fully automated with minimal human involvement, so that the recruiters of the day are really dealing with the top 25, top 30 applicants for a role and being allowed to deliver the human experience that we know humans will always be best at delivering in the interview process, I think is mind-blowing. So I do see the front part of the talent planning process becoming a little bit more asynchronous.
I do see the screening portion becoming a little bit more asynchronous. And I see the opportunity for the talent acquisition, talent advisory function to deliver human service to their internal customers and a human experience to the external talent that they engage with at a high quality level. That's where we're headed.
Fantastic. Master, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Matt.
Hi, Madeline. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Matt. I'm doing well. I love this show. I just loved hearing that whole conversation. I had so many thoughts that I would love to talk about, but I know we're going to get into some of that. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, there's lots of things that we can talk about. Before we do, though, for the very few people who may not have come across you and your work before, could you introduce yourself and just tell everyone what you do?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Laurano. I am an analyst. So I study and do research on the HR technology market.
Fantastic. So let's start with what we were talking about kind of earlier in the show, because it has sort of dominated the news. And I know you posted some really interesting stuff on it. The SAP Smart Recruiters acquisition or proposed acquisition. Tell us your take on it.
So interesting because the announcement was it Friday morning, early in the morning? Yeah. So probably 8 a.m. for you around that time. But my phone blew up at that time. So phone calls, texts. So it was about 3 a.m. for me. And it was huge news. I mean, there's been rumors about SAP making a major acquisition and talent acquisition for a long time, for a few months now. And we all had our guesses. My guess was something very different than this. But hearing this news, it made complete sense. I think what you said is absolutely true. Smart Recruiters has done a fantastic job of repositioning themselves as a company, but also their product completely, a complete overhaul of the entire organization, the culture, the product, into something that is very modern and innovative and obviously agentic focused. And that's, a perfect, I think a perfect acquisition for SAP. What I said in my kind of article, in my blog and summary is that this was not a product play. It's not filling a gap within SAP's product or portfolio. This is a complete commitment and redirection into something that is intelligent and agentic. And that's, to me, a more exciting acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you think that affects the rest of what SAP does? Because obviously we were talking about, is this the start of a new way of thinking, or does it just become part of the kind of the enterprise mix that they already have?
Yeah, it's interesting because everyone's thinking this way, right? Everyone's trying to move in this direction of this more intelligent agentic model for every company. Small startups are going in this direction. We're seeing the huge providers, ERP providers moving in this direction too. It's going to be much harder and slower for the larger organizations to do a complete shift. I mean, they've got thousands and thousands of customers on a lot of legacy products still. They have customers using disparate solutions in addition to what they're using from them. So it's definitely a long journey. We're seeing Workday and Oracle even making huge announcements in agentic. The interesting thing with SAP, though, with this announcement is their recruiting product, they're not going to like that I said this, but was lagging, right? I think that would be the commentary compared to some of their peers. They made an amazing hire with bringing Sarah White on. I mean, that is a huge, bold statement to say we're taking this very seriously. She's obviously, a thought leader in the space and well-respected expert. And then following that hire and putting her in an executive position to say, and now we're making a massive acquisition and doing a complete rethink of our TA product.
And how, what happens next? How does the rest of the market respond? I'm sure that, SAP has competitors or similar size organizations who may also be lacking slightly in the talent acquisition space. Do you think this is the start of, the start of more acquisitions? Is it a one-off? What do you think is going to happen?
I think so. I mean, we even saw this. This is different, obviously, but, 2012, 2013, when acquisitions started to become contagious, that happened in 2005, 2006 as well. So I think absolutely, we heard in January, this was going to be a big year for acquisitions in HR tech, and that didn't happen because of political and economic situations here in the US at the time. And now we're kind of coming off of that and stabilizing a little bit. and companies are looking at their options. I think two things to answer your question. First, I think there were probably a lot of very disappointed providers that thought they might have been in the mix for this acquisition and this opportunity and did not obviously become that vendor of choice. But then the second piece is I do think there will be other acquisitions. Absolutely. And I don't know if it's going to be a combination of, their SAP's competitors saying we need to now compete in a major way, or a lot of the best of breed ATS providers saying we need an out because this is not either what we're going to be able to do or we know it's not sustainable. I think to me, I wrote about this too. And I think this is the biggest takeaway from this whole thing is the ATS market in particular is no longer ERP versus best of breed. Like it's no longer, Workday, SAP, Oracle versus iSIM, Smart Recruiters, Employee. It's now Workday, SAP, Oracle versus intelligent agentic systems. And there are a lot of those.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fascinating. It's like the next phase, isn't it? Because you had that, all those acquisitions 10 years ago or 10 years plus ago. Then you had things like Smart Recruiters emerging as we're different, we're agile, we're taking on these people, and here we are going around again. So it's kind of interesting from that perspective. I suppose digging into the kind of the ATS bit a little bit, because even before this, we've seen a real sort of confusion of categories in the market, haven't we? We used to have ATSs and CRMs and this system and this system. But it kind of seems that everyone's trying to do everything these days. What's your sort of take on how that market is evolving?
It's so interesting. Everyone is trying to do everything. And I think for a few reasons, a lot of these companies have taken a lot of investment and they need their deal size to go up beyond, $300,000. They want to see over $1 million for talent acquisition tech, and that's going to come through an ATS deal. So I think that's part of it. And then I think if you're looking at where providers are going with philosophies around skills-based or intelligence, it makes sense to be an ATS. It makes complete sense. So we're seeing providers, be able to, kind of join this and say, we never thought we'd be an ATS provider, and now there's an opportunity to do that. Maybe that's looking at an acquisition. Maybe that's because they do see that there's a bigger opportunity.
No, absolutely. It's, as I say, fascinating stuff. And just in terms of the market, in terms of adoption, because, we kind of sit here, we talk about agentic AI and all these kind of things, which are very much the direction that things are going in. But where are we sitting at the moment? What are the sort of the big AI use cases? What are we seeing in terms of adoption? What's actually happening in the market here and now, as opposed to a year, 6 months time, a year's time, 2 years time?
Yeah. Well, I'll look back first at 6 months ago or a year ago. And I felt like everyone was very hesitant around talking about AI. Some providers were afraid to even use AI in their messaging. Other providers were doubling down on it, and buyers didn't really know what to do with it. They didn't know if they were going to have a lot of obstacles internally, if they were trying to buy solutions that were talking about AI. They didn't know if they would now have different stakeholders involved in that process. So it felt like everyone was very hesitant to talk about AI a year ago. Feels like that's completely changed this year. And there's, more of a green light. Companies are saying, especially in TA, we can now buy AI. I don't even know if they know what that means, but it's like, now we can buy AI. And it's like, well, what are you buying? So I think we're seeing kind of this green light era of AI right now, but there's so much confusion. Like, what is that? Is that, I think a lot of companies are like, we're buying AI. And it's like, okay, well, does that mean you're buying it for a specific use case? Are you looking at your existing providers and seeing what they're doing in this area? Are you looking at, other kind of platforms to be able to be this kind of layer on top of your ATS? And I think there's a lot of confusion around what that means for companies. You introduce generative AI, you introduce agentic AI, and that's another layer of multiple layers of confusion. Pricing is confusing. You've got a lot of generative AI capabilities and copilots that are free within the platform, and should be, to me, that's like an upgrade. But then you have agentic AI capabilities, and you're introducing something that's completely different, and there's a price for that, as there should be. And that price really hasn't been figured out. So I think it's an exciting time because we're in this green light era, but I think it's also incredibly confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I made a prediction right at the start of the year that this would be the year we stopped talking about AI. And what I meant by that was, and I'm kind of seeing this in conferences already, because I think this time last year, everyone had AI written on their stand with AI. We have AI with extra AI. And I think, it's good that we're getting into that, talking about use cases and outcomes and things like that, because I think saying we've got AI is a bit like saying we've got a website. Because it's just so ubiquitous. So it's good to, it's good to kind of really get into the detail of it. And as you say, there is so much confusion out there. What else is kind of on your radar at the moment? What else should we be looking at? What other kind of signals are you seeing out in the market in terms of what's interesting?
Yeah, I mean, AI has just been dominating, so it's hard to think about anything other than that right now. But analytics is huge too. I mean, that's a big topic we've been focused on in our research, and I think companies are feeling that as well, certainly related to AI. But you've got all these systems, and companies bought all these systems during the pandemic that they still don't really know what to do with, and there's no way to get the information that you need to provide internally from managing multiple systems. So, this kind of era of all these people analytics providers, and there's true value there to me. There's true ROI there. And that's obviously companies. It used to feel like a luxury for large organizations that may have had a people analytics team. That's no longer the case. Now it's absolutely something that even small organizations can have. There's a lot of providers that play in that area. People Insights is one that we work with that, certainly plays in that area too. So it's something that is a big topic and everyone's talking about. I've been focused on the CRM market quite a bit because we're publishing our CRM index in a couple weeks. So that's been a big one for me. And that's been so interesting to watch too. But analytics and AI are part of that too.
Yeah, let's just sort of dive into the people analytics, people insights a bit in a bit more detail. Tell us about what's going on. What is it that, what's interesting, what's innovative, what should companies be looking for in that area?
So, I mean, to me, the number one value and benefit of investing in people analytics is you get immediate answers in a very dynamic way to the questions you're being asked internally. So if you're in HR or even if you're in people analytics and that's your profession, you are probably getting more questions internally from executives or, from C-level executives that want immediate answers. And that can be very difficult to find those answers when you're managing multiple systems and trying to figure out where this data is or if that data even makes sense. I did some work with a pharmaceutical company here in Boston and, on some of the dashboards for their TA systems, the number of hires being reported on these dashboards were not correct. That's because they had multiple systems trying to integrate and they just didn't do it. So to be able to have a people analytics provider that manages all the data from all your systems and gives you those immediate answers, to me, that's like the number one benefit. I think what's interesting, and I mentioned this a little bit, is it used to feel like it was just a luxury for large companies or for companies that had a specific people analytics team. Those individuals that work in people analytics are amazing, right? They're masterminds. They're super intelligent. They don't really feel like they're part of HR, and sometimes they're not part of HR at all, but it's a different buyer and it's a different user. Now we're seeing a lot of the people analytics providers really kind of going after HR and saying, you don't need to have a PhD, you don't need to necessarily be part of a different kind of society than HR. You can benefit from this as well.
And again, that AI is driving that forward, isn't it? It's kind of making it so much easier. Sarah White's actually listening. She's left us a comment. It hasn't come up on the screen. But hi, Sarah. Glad you.
I'm sure she's had crazy busy. Several.
Thank you for tuning in. Okay, so I kind of ask this question. I shouldn't really ask you this question because you're an analyst. You're looking at what's going on. You look at the data. But where do you think we're going? What do you think the future is going to look like? If you were going to make a kind of prediction about where we might be in 2 years' time, what scenario would you pick?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. Matt, do you remember when we were together in Scottsdale? Was this 2-3 years ago? Probably.
Yeah.
It's probably a little over 3 years ago. And we were talking about the metaverse. This was our future of where things were going. Right, and we were wrong. But it's hard to know.
Or just early.
Maybe we should go back to that. Maybe that is the future.
On my slide somewhere of things that might happen in the future. But yeah. Anyway,
me too. But so it's really hard to know. I mean, we didn't predict that this whole agentic AI phenomenon would just like blow up all of HR tech, and it has certainly. So I expect we're going to see even more of this, and I think all providers are going to have to pivot in some way to this model, because companies are evaluating their workforce in the same way. They're saying, okay, do we need, people? Do we need technology? Do we need AI? What does this future look like? And I think when you look at a lot of companies that have already made announcements to say our HR team is no longer just responsible for people, it's also responsible for digital tech, that signals, I think, where HR is going, and providers are going to have to meet that need as well in a major way. And, strategic workforce planning is not the most exciting topic to a lot of people. It feels like maybe it's been talked about for a long time and we've not seen a ton of change, but there is no way we're going to be able to look at what the future of work looks like and the future of our workforce looks like with AI, with the agents, with all the data that we have, without strategic workforce planning being a huge part of that.
No, I agree. I think it's just a fascinating time at the moment. I think that HR and technology thing, I mean, there's a couple of sort of well-publicized cases. I've spoken to a couple of people who are going down that route as well. I would never have predicted that 10 years ago, but it's just kind of shows you, doesn't it? And finally, what have you got coming up? What are you publishing next? Where can people see you speak next? What's happening for you for the rest of the year?
I'll be in Chicago for an HR summit in August. So that's my next trip. And then I'll be at HR Tech, obviously. And I'm super excited for that, 6 weeks. And then we're publishing a lot of research. I just finished a report on employee communication in the healthcare industry. It's like one of my favorite reports that I've done so far. So I'm very excited about that. And then the CRM index. I mean, it's a huge undertaking. This is a huge report. It profiles 14 providers. It's very in-depth. And, we have associate team of analysts that have been working really, really hard on this report, and it publishes in a few weeks. So feels good to publish that. It also feels horrible because I'm sure I'll get many things wrong and there'll be lots of different changes by then. But
well, good luck. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much for talking to me. Hey, Laurie, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm terrific, my friend. Are you really going to make me follow all of that?
Of course I am. I have to say, I love your job title on the thing there. That's amazing. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I mean it sincerely. We have been, colleagues and friends for a very long time, and it's fun to work again with you. So thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So just in case there is anyone watching who has not come across your enormous body of fantastic work, can you just start by introducing yourself and telling everyone what you do?
Sure. My name is Laurie Ruettimann. I'm a writer and speaker and podcaster, and I focus on the world of work. And for many years, I worked in human resources and was no good at it and had to find a different way. And so I went on a path of kind of analyzing, doing research, but it all intersected with the world of social media. So I worked at big brands, many people know, like Pfizer and Monsanto, and I was a writer at the conference board. But I've also appeared on sketchy chat shows and been all over the internet for many years. But my belief is that work is over fundamentally as we know it, and there's no fixing work. Like, I think that's misplaced energy, and that we fix the world by fixing ourselves and focusing on our communities. And there are all sorts of ways we can take that conversation, whether it's through the rise of AI or universal basic income. But the way we do work today in 2025 has a shelf life of about 18 months, and things are going to start to radically change. And will be bumpy for many, and hopefully at the other side of it, something glorious will come out of this.
So, I mean, let's start there. Just tell us a little bit. What do you mean by that? What is it that's going to change?
Yeah. Well, currently we're in this, I think, war with technology, right? Where we've got this rise of what we're calling artificial intelligence through a lot of different modalities. And it is currently displacing workers. And it's displacing workers because workers are expensive. And as much as people like to say people are our greatest assets in a company, people are the greatest problem. We know this, right? I mean, they're human. And it takes a really wonderful and patient CEO and board of directors and leadership team to be able to factor in the cost of doing business with all the human complexities. But there are financial pressures right now from markets and from investors saying we're focused on productivity, we're focused on revenue. So there is this drive to replace people with technology, and we're not being honest about that. But what will happen, I believe, is that there will be pressure on governments and nonprofits to come up with an answer. How do we solve for the interest of people and passion and purpose in this world if we decouple it from employment, if we decouple it from income? And that, I think, is the greatest challenge and the greatest, I think, opportunity of a lifetime. And that's what I'm excited about.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm completely, I'm completely with you on that. And it's,
I mean, Matt, I don't know how it is over in the UK, but right now here in America and in many countries, there's this drive to almost create businesses that are functioning as a B2B economy without people and using cryptocurrencies and currencies that are outside the norm, right? And so the question becomes, is that the future of what's happening here? B2B interactions focusing well above humanity and a currency that you and I necessarily don't have access to. What happens when someone breaks an arm? What happens if someone just wants to learn about poetry or history, right? We're going to need caregivers, educators, people who can keep the human story alive and keep the human people alive. How do we care for them? How do we pay for that? How do we get people to buy wonderful things and create an economy? Well, there's an answer, and that answer is universal basic income. So it's like complex and interesting and dynamic, and we're only just scratching the surface of it. That's what excites me.
Yeah, because I think what I was going to say is that it's almost shocking that more governments and there aren't talking about this. There aren't more conversations about this. There appears to be this kind of state of collective denial that anything is going to happen, or it's going to it'll just create more jobs. And I think there's always interesting kind of parallels that people throw out. Well, remember the Industrial Revolution, and what happened with that was it created more jobs. And if you dig into it, there's this, and I'm not a historian, but there was this kind of time, I think they called it the Engels pause, where it didn't work out like that. There were displaced agricultural workers, like living in slums in the cities. And it took a long time before that kind of corrected itself, and and it kind of moved into the world that people describe when they say technology just creates more jobs. So there's some really interesting historical parallels there as well.
And, there are people like Sam Altman and Bill Gates and many big thinkers out there, even Melinda Gates, right? And all of these foundations that are currently thinking about what is the true meaning of our existence. And for hundreds of years now, since the Industrial Revolution, we have been told and we have been taught and we've been encouraged to believe that our work is our worth. And that's brought a lot of benefit to humanity. We've put people on the moon. I believe we've put people on the moon, and we've gone to space, and, we're making great strides with medical research. But as we start to think about the why behind humanity, if technology can do a lot of this really important work, what's left for us to do? And suddenly we start to see the breaking of the way we think about earning an income, pursuing education, being in community with one another. And we are going to need governments, educational institutions, all sorts of researchers to come together and really rethink what does it mean to care for one another and create a safety net so that those who just want to foster kittens like me can do that, but we're not poor, or those who are displaced from 20th and early 21st century jobs don't get just driven over in this new world. How do we care for one another, but still encourage people to be bright and smart and innovative? That is the challenge that we're going to face. And I actually think when we talk about the future of HR, there's a role for people like us who think about production and productivity and purpose and meaning to think about where humans fit in the future of the world. But you're right, governments are not talking about this. And so therefore, what's the incentive to really think differently?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned education there, and I think that's it's kind of another key area. And I know that it's similar in other countries, but certainly in Britain, we still have an education system where the core curriculum was invented to train people to be administrators in the British Empire.
Not much better over here. I mean,
and it's not really kind of really moved on, and certainly doesn't keep up with where we are. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's going to be really interesting times. Just to kind of sort of, I suppose, just to get back, just to kind of sort of stick right in the here and now, because there was something that I kind of spotted you writing about that I wanted to talk about. So over the last sort of couple of days, I noticed that. Well, first of all, I noticed that you're doing an event with Scott Stratton. Is that coming up, or have I missed it?
Yeah, it's coming up on Wednesday, where we are going to talk about the inhuman way that AI is being shoehorned into human resources processes and policies and platforms. So yeah, Scott Stratton and I will be on LinkedIn at 1:30 Eastern on Wednesday talking about that.
And I'm certainly going to watch that, because I'm obviously a big fan of you, big fan of Scott as well, and the work that he does. But it was interesting because I kind of, before I noticed that he was diving into lots of posts that people were writing about HR on LinkedIn with a bit of an AI reality check. And I kind of noticed that you were kind of writing about it. You wrote that article about AI fluency in HR. Give us your kind of take on all of this. What's going on with HR and AI? What should people be paying attention to? What should people just be kind of ignoring? What's going on?
Well, the answer is we don't know. Right? I mean, that is the only fair, honest answer. Where we are in the world of AI is just at the very beginning. We are very early. We are crawling out of the swamp right now, right out of the miasma. And for anybody to stand in front of us as a function, as a leader, and say, this is where we need to be with AI, or this is the future, they have no right to do that, because they don't have any answers. What we have are little experiments happening right now, often at the cost of workers, often for the benefit of short-term profitable gains. And we're not being very honest about that. So there are some good things that are happening around automation and digitization that were predicted 10 years ago, but that's not really AI. Those are just efficiency gains with the current technology that we have. So I think we've got some misuse of language happening right now. But the future of AI, of artificial intelligence, is unwritten and actually unproven. So for anybody to sit here and say that they have an answer to this is insane. And I actually go to a report written by JP Morgan Chase, signed off by Jamie Dimon, their CEO, who said the products and services being built with AI right now are a security threat to more than just the individual platform, to ecosystems, because they're being written so quickly, so fast, without an understanding of the way that AI should be developed, that there are all these backdoor ways for nefarious people to get in and steal data. So the answer is nobody knows anything. We're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And for leaders to stand up and say HR needs HR fluency, HR needs critical thinking skills. HR needs to be able to ask questions around project management and cybersecurity and safety. HR needs to be brave enough to say, I know this sounds boring and compliance driven, but this is really important because this is about safety. So that's how I feel pretty strongly about that. And I just, I'm so offended when anybody pretends to have an answer about the future of work and the future of AI and HR.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's kind of a really good point. And I think that I suppose there's two bits. I think the critical thinking is crucial, and unfortunately, what tends to happen with a lot of technology, particularly with AR, with HR, but with other departments as well, you get this kind of like, well, we're not technical, so we don't think we can really, comment on it. And actually, you need people in the room. You need dissenting voices in the room. You need people to kind of take that, that kind of other, that other viewpoint, don't you?
Yeah, and I'm actually influenced by Matt Charney, who wrote a really beautiful article about where we are with AI and ethics, because I think there's a role for HR to ask critical thinking skills about the way that the platforms affect and influence the state of work, affect and influence employees, right? But I think what is happening for both technical and non-technical people, so people who are engineers, developers, and HR professionals, is that we're all being caught up in the marketing hype. And we all look to others as experts when truly no one is an expert. And so really getting down to the basics of what makes for a good work process. What makes for efficient work? What makes for work where there is no moral injury to employees, right? Those are the, I think, 101 questions that we need to always ask before we can pretend to ask and even have the right to go any further. So I don't know, I think we're all caught up in this marketing hype cycle. And frankly, I'm a little sick of it. So I don't know, tell me why I'm wrong though. Am I wrong?
I don't think you are wrong. I think it's I think it's a complex situation because I think that there is a huge amount of marketing hype out there. People take things seriously. Perhaps they shouldn't take things seriously. I think people sometimes cover up their lack of understanding by quoting some of the marketing hype. So I think that is one issue. I do think the other issue, though, is that sometimes people can look at all that marketing hype and say, this is just rubbish. It's another fad. I'm not interested. And then that comes back to your earlier point about the fundamental changes at work and actually missing that that's happening. So I think it's kind of nuanced from that perspective. I do think, though,
Oh, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to say, this brings up an interesting point for me that I've been saying now for over 20 years. HR sits at the intersection of work, power, politics, and money. And if we ask good questions, and if we pay attention to trends, and if we are historians in those areas, we're going to be fine and be able to apply those skills to future trends within AI. But the problem is we show up as theater majors, or I have a degree in creative writing, right? We show up with this liberal arts background and we want to play business person. And to your point, we often are not confident and we adopt the language around us of marketing, of, these sales tropes. And we don't, I think, flex our critical thinking skills enough to be stewards for the people that are actually trusting us to be stewards. So work, power, politics, money, if you solve for that, or if you at least keep that in mind, I think that will hold you in good stead in this conversation.
So just to kind of finish off with, let's just talk quickly about ethics, because we were talking about ethics at the start of the show, and you have a course on sort of ethical HR leadership. So just give us your take on where do ethics fit into all of this?
Well, it's a really good question. I think there is, and so again, I'm going to quote Matt Charney, who just wrote this really brilliant article, and I hope somebody can link to it in the notes here today. But there is no universal standard of ethics, right? And so we have what are commonly defined ways of treating people. Some people use the golden rule. Some people use other frameworks from philosophers. But I think for me, really understanding that the be-all, end-all is not profitability. It's not revenue, but it's like putting the human at the center of the equation. If we can keep the person at the center of this, we're going to be in good stead. So in my LinkedIn Learning course on HR and ethics, I actually ask people to be brave enough to put themselves in situations and think about how they would react. For example, put yourself up on the Jumbotron in your worst moment, when you've said something unkind to your child, or when you've been dismissive of an elder, like your parents, or when you've done something wrong at work, you've not been a good ally. Could you survive that Jumbotron moment? Well, that feeling of shame, that feeling of regret is something you should hold close to your heart in human resources, because that's who you're dealing with. You're dealing with people at their lowest moments. And in that lowest moment, really remember the humanity and try to find a way out for all people involved.
My thanks to Master, Madeline, and Laurie. You can check out the Alder Hour live streaming on LinkedIn every Monday afternoon. Regular service is going to resume on Recruiting Future from next week, so make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next week, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.